and we are live on the Voice of the Cape Facebook and YouTube channels for the Voc Matric revision program. Today we are going through our last lesson on religion studies with educator at Future SA Online High School, Fatima Adamson. Assalamu alaikum, Fatima.
Walaikum salam, Juanita. How are you?
I'm well, Alhamdulillah, but in a way, it's like a bittersweet moment because you've been with us now for the past few weeks and doing these
Yes.
sessions on the subject, but also noting that the examinations for paper one and two of religion studies will be written soon. The first being on the
The 11th of November at 2 o'clock, and then the second being on the 14th of November at 2 as well.
Okay, so today is the last session on the subject. So
Yes.
encourage our matric students who are preparing for the religion studies papers to also take advantage of all the previous lessons that we've conducted in the video section of the Voice of the Cape Facebook page, and also you can scroll through the Voice of the Cape YouTube channel for those lessons, inshallah. But without further delay, I now hand over to you to proceed.
Shukran so much, Konita, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Students, teachers, colleagues of mine, I trust that everyone is well and we all are quite anxious for our learners leading up to the papers for religion studies, but also the rest of the subjects as well. And we pray that the subjects that have been written was good and you felt good about the paper, and we pray that the results will be also beneficial, inshallah. So today we are just going to finish off hermeneutics and the topic of normative sources, which is quite a big topic in religion studies and also in paper two. So we're just going to look at what is the study of hermeneutics today and how we use the study of hermeneutics to interpret normative sources. And remember, we deal with three different types of normative sources, which are your inspiration, and then also your texts that you study, and also your oral tradition. And then the final topic that I'd like to cover for our matriculants is the topic of religion and the sciences. And this again also a very common topic that comes in paper two, and learners do answer this question quite often. So yeah, the purpose of this live is to obviously gain understanding on how to answer this topic effectively. Okay, so today we are going to look at the hermeneutical principles. But before we can understand the principle, we need to understand what does the word hermeneutical mean. So in religion studies, we speak about hermeneutics being the interpretation of the sacred text. So here again, we are looking at one of the normative sources and the interpretation of the normative source, which is the sacred text. Okay, so hermeneutics involves looking at the spiritual text in its context and considering all the factors that affect it. Okay, so what type of writing is sacred text? When was it written? Who wrote it? Who was it written for? And what were the circumstances at the time that it was written? Okay, so hermeneutics delves into looking at what are these factors that affected the spiritual text in that time or during that particular context. Okay, so the first hermeneutical principle that we look at when we study the interpretation of text is looking at grammar and historical context. And here, students, when you are posed this question, they love to ask a 16-mark question on this particular topic with regards to the hermeneutical principles. So they will ask you to list the hermeneutical principles and also explain them. And again, I need to emphasize that we need to use these headings as is, Please do not change it around. Don't make it historical context and grammar. I need you to write it down as grammar and historical context, because that is what we're looking for in marking your question papers. Okay, so the first one is looking at grammar and the historical context of the particular sacred text. So this principle means that we have to use the rules of grammar and also the historical facts to interpret sacred text. So the way the particular text has been written out. Okay, so we look at the exact meanings of the words used in their most ordinary sense. Okay, so the ordinary sense to us. And then the second hermeneutical principle that assists us in interpreting sacred texts is clearest meaning. So when we look at this principle, we try to understand that what the particular writer of that sacred text is trying to aim. Right? What is the aim? What is the main thoughts and ideas that the author is trying to communicate to us? And then also, what clearest meaning is, what this particular principle is trying to make us understand about the sacred text that we are interpreting, is looking at what does the text, right? What does the text mean? What is the clearest meaning of the text to you? Okay, so again, you can have the heading and one of these points, and you will get the 4 marks, right? So you just have to know the explanation of the principle as well, and adequately explain it as well. Okay, so the third hermeneutical principle that we look at is plan, purpose, and context. And here again, students, we don't say context, purpose, and plan. I want you to write it out as plan, purpose, and context. Okay. So this hermeneutical principle deals with interpreting text as a whole. Right, so looking at the Quran as a whole, what is the underlying writing plan or structure? Right, what was the author's purpose in writing that particular text? Okay, and then we look at the fourth hermeneutical principle, which is looking at the meanings of words. So this hermeneutical principle deals with the interpretation of how is the meaning of words changed over time, and also how is it changed from place to place. So normative in South Africa might not mean the same as normative in the USA. So looking at or trying to find out what are the meanings of the words at that time, and obviously how is it originally used in the normative source. Okay, and then the final hermeneutical principle is figurative language. So some sacred texts can be highly figurative, non-literal language, and this needs to be taken into account when we are interpreting such texts, because again, it might mean that when in Christianity they say that they had eaten from the forbidden tree, is it literally the forbidden tree, or does it have a figurative meaning? So an example. So it is best to prepare a sacred text of your particular religion, and how to interpret it using the hermeneutical principles. And just to cover our bases and to make sure that, you know what, in the event that they do ask you to use the hermeneutical principles, and here again, boys and girls, we can also include an example when we are going through those hermeneutical principles, right? So I'm going to look at Islam, and this is a chapter out of the Holy Quran, which is chapter 30, verse 112, and it says that, say, He is God, the one and the only, God the eternal, the absolute. He begetteth not, nor is he begotten, and there is none like unto him. So when we look at interpreting this particular verse, right, but interpreting this verse based on these hermeneutical principles, we're looking at that this verse in the Quran teaches us that Islam is completely monotheistic, right? So the belief that there is only one true God. And here we need to say, or we need to interpret that God is referred to in Islam as Allah, right? And again, the word Allah in Arabic has no plural, no gender, and obviously does not have a diminutive. Okay, so again, God starts with a capital letter, referring to Him being one, Him being only. And this now ties into, I think it's your first hermeneutical principle when we look at grammar and historical context, right? Why do we use the capital letter? So this shows that these qualities apply solely to God. The no gender, right? No plural. It is solely to God. He begetteth not, nor is he begotten, indicates that God was not created. And here, this is context that is coming into. So when we speak about he begetteth not, nor is he begotten, it relates to God not being, or not being part of creation. He is not part of creation. He is the one who had created. Okay. So it also means that he did not father any being. And subsequently, because Islam is the third Abrahamic religion, again, this particular text is a very important text in Islam, because it now follows the Christian principle of God being the father of Jesus Christ. Okay, so here the context is that we are relating it to Christians believing that God is the father, or takes a fathership role, right? And here we are disputing, and we are saying that, you know what, he is not a father. He cannot again have any human characteristics. Okay, God is also has always existed and will continue to do so, meaning that he is not limited to time nor space. Okay, and then the last line in this particular verse relates to God teaching, or the teaching that nothing compares to him. He is unique in his attributes. Okay, so I just want to go back. So, and there is the verse says, and there is none like unto him. So this last line is comparing, is comparing nothing to coming close to God. He is unique in his attributes, right, and characteristics. And I'm going to leave it there for this particular topic. And again, here, boys and girls, I want to emphasize the importance of adequately preparing for the normative sources topic. And again, we need to know the roles, the three different types of normative sources, being your oral tradition, your inspiration, and also your sacred text. And again, your hermeneutical principles. You need to know it verbatim, and obviously give me an explanation for each. And also you can use an example of interpretation of sacred text, which is what we did now. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the final topic today, and for this session, right? We're going to look at the topic of the religion and the sciences. Okay, so there are different views with regards to how the universe came into being. And again, in religion studies, we are going to study two main theories and look at how the Big Bang theory, how does religion view the Big Bang theory, which explains how the world came into being, or how the universe came into being. And then we're also going to look at the second theory, which is the theory of evolution, which relates to how we as human beings came into being, how creation came into being. So, and how religion views that. Okay, so I'm going to use the Christianity as the example for how creation came into being. So a religious account of creation. And here, boys and girls, it is important to know, or important to note, that the Big Bang theory relates to how the world came into being, and the theory of evolution relates to how humans came into being. Okay, so we're going to look at the first one, which is Christianity. And Again, here, boys and girls, lots of repetition in other topics, right? That we can use similar points to explain the religious account of creation. Okay, so Christians believe that God has three aspects: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And in Genesis 1 and 2 in the Old Testament of the Bible, it tells the story of the creation of the world. Okay, so again, this now we are relating it to how the creation of the world came into being. Okay, so according to Genesis 1 and 2, the world came into being, where God roamed the universe and the waters and created light and darkness. Okay, and this is the first day, right? So this is the first day he roamed the universe and he created the waters and also light and darkness. Okay, and then on the second day, God created heaven and separated the water from the earth. And then on the third day, he raised the dry land and created plants. And subsequently, on the fourth day, God made the light day and the lesser light, which is night. And on the fifth day, he created the creatures of the sea and the earth. And as we know, on the sixth day, God created all kinds of living creatures on earth. And on the final day, which is called the Sabbath day, the seventh day, God had rested. So it is important to note here that we need to know our own religion's account of how the world came into being. So if you are Muslim or you're a Muslim learner, in this particular book that the Department of Basic Education developed, you will have Christianity, Islam, African traditional religion being the three main in South Africa. So it will be, and Conita, we will share the book as well after the live, so that learners can basically use the book in order to aid their studying. Okay, so if you're a Christian student, you're going to have to learn what is the Christian concept of how the world came into being. Okay, so I'm just going to focus on Christianity because obviously we don't have time to go through every single of the 8 religions that we do study in religion studies. Okay, so after the seventh day, right, he had now had created Adam and Eve, right, who lived in heaven, which is the Garden of Eden. And God had forbidden Adam and Eve from eating from a fruit from the truth of knowledge. Okay, so the tree of knowledge, sorry, the tree of knowledge. So we now know, and a lot of similarities between Islam and Judaism here. So we know the serpent tempted Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, which she did, and also she had persuaded Adam to do so. And then when God came to know about their sin, he drove them to earth to toil. And we also know that subsequently we're from Adam and Eve being immortal in the Garden of Eden, they had now become mortal on earth. Okay, so Christians believe that man is the most important of God's creations, and they refer to the fall to find answers to suffering and death. And this fall is the fall of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden to earth. So now we need to look at what does science say about how the universe came into being. So, and here, boys and girls, we are looking at the Big Bang Theory. Remember, Big Bang Theory, how the universe came into being. Okay, so the most popular scientific theory that we know, right? And according to this theory, we don't know what existed before the Big Bang. And here again, verbatim, we need to know the Big Bang Theory at least 10 points, so that if they do ask us to explain the Big Bang Theory, and it's not uncommon for them to ask us that we know it adequately and that we are able to achieve that 20 marks. So again, here we can use these slides as well, and use these points to write and to answer this question adequately. Okay, so again, the Big Bang Theory believes that there was an enormous explosion, and within seconds, the universe has appeared or had appeared and filled out to an enormous size. They believe that this happened about 13.7 to 15 billion years ago. And um, I want to focus on the billion here. Please make sure that you do write billion, because we do argue whether we're going to accept million or whether we're going to accept billion. But again, make sure that you know that it's billion years ago. Okay, so because of this Big Bang, this enormous explosion, we now had temperature differences in the initial explosion, and because of that, it led to varying densities throughout the universe. And this is what they believe eventually formed these clusters of matter, our solar systems, etc., and energy. Okay, so these clusters formed a collection of stars called galaxies, and therefore these galaxies now had to condense into a combination of stars and planets, and we call these groupings solar systems. So we need to know what the scientific account of how the universe was created. Okay, so again, your religion, and then also the scientific account of how the universe came into being. Okay, so the Big Bang theory also been the scientists that affirmed the and promoted the Big Bang theory. They believe that the universe is still expanding, but it is not known whether or how the universe is going to end. And then an important note is that not all of scientists agree with the Big Bang theory. There are many objections, right? That details within the process. That there are certain negatives or certain downfalls with the Big Bang theory, and similarly there are also different hypotheses about how life began on Earth. Okay, so these theories can be tested, but scientists cannot be sure which are correct because it happened so many years ago. Okay. And now we're going to look at religion and the second theory that we study in religion studies, which is the theory of evolution. Okay. So again, remember Big Bang theory, how the universe came into being, theory of evolution, or Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, how human beings came into being. Okay, and I'm going to show you a question how they can ask it directly. Explain Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, or they can ask, explain how human beings came into being um, scientifically. Okay, so Charles Darwin published a book called The Origin, or On the Origin of Species, and basically he was a sociologist, a scientist in his own way as well, and he studied and traveled to the Galapagos Islands. And life science learners here as well, you learn this in life science as well. And you look at how he studied the different birds found on the different islands, right? So these different birds, what he noticed was that these different birds had different adaptations to the climate of the different islands. And what he put forward was that this theory, including human beings, that all creatures, all beings on this earth had evolved over a period of perhaps million years, and it stems from a common primitive life form. Okay, so in our case, as human beings, he had concluded that chimpanzees and humans had shared a common ancestor, which were primates. Okay, so this theory proposed that all life evolved through a process called natural selection from primitive forms and continued to adapt and evolved. Okay, so again, apes being the shared ancestor, And what his main ideas were, or Charles Darwin's main ideas, were that species contained a great variety of minor differences. And so when he looked at the beaks of the birds on the Galapagos Islands, he found that those islands that had smaller seeds on it, it was not necessary for the beaks of those birds of that particular island where they were softer, maybe smaller seeds, to have to be big. So over millions of years, right, the beaks evolved to adapt to the particular climate, the particular seeds that bird was eating. Okay, so why did this happen? It happened because of survival, or he had proposed that it happened because of survival, and also for what we call natural selection. So those birds that had survived had now developed, evolved, right? And they were now favored, right? And they did not struggle to survive. So he applied this now to human beings as well. And he said that in the fight for survival, human beings changed from apes to from apes to human beings. Okay, so he said that um, that human beings had evolved from apes because they needed to survive. We needed to become from bipedalism, and life science learners will know what I mean when I say from bipedalism, walking on fours, to being upright, right? So he believed, or he had proposed that the walking on four limbs had to change over millions of years to where we are now walking on twos. Okay, so the process and the change of adaptation happened over a long period of time. It wasn't 2 years, it wasn't 4 years, it was millions of years. Okay, however, science offers no explanation of creation as a part of a divine plan, and hence why Charles Darwin subsequently got imprisoned when he had released and published this book, because at that time religion and science was intertwined, so much so that religious knowledge took precedence over scientific knowledge. So what Charles Darwin, he was a Christian too, what he now proposed had gone against the authorities, and hence why he was under house arrest and up until his death as well, because of how much discord and how much conflict his theory had caused. Okay, so Christianity's counter argument against the theory of evolution. And here, learners, students, we need to know our religion's argument against Darwin's theory of evolution. And don't worry, I'm going to share with Conita the book as well, where I extracted this information from, so that you can go and find your religion quite easily in preparation for the 14th of November. I don't want you guys to run around for any of this. Okay, so again, Darwin, who was a natural science graduate and a geologist, was a Christian and had no intentions to challenge religious beliefs. So initially, he did not want to challenge religious beliefs with his book. However, his counter graduates, his counter scholars and colleagues around him responded with anger, right? And they argued that the theory of evolution seemed to go against religious teachings that God had made earth and that he created all living beings as they knew them. Christians also believe that God had created humans in his own image. Thus, the theory of evolution um, had disputed this now, right? That And also add counter that Christians believe that humans were superior to all other creatures and had a soul that is immortal. Right? So Darwin's book ruffled a little bit of feathers to the Christians at that time because they proposed that it had gone against the religious teachings. Okay, so Christians also argued that the theory of evolution challenged the idea that God is the designer of the universe. And they put forward that the beauty, order, and the complexity of the universe is evidence of the fact that God had a perfect design, also known as the theory of the intelligent design when he created the world. So Christians believe that living things adapts or adapted to the environment, because this is also how God had created his divine plan. And they opposed this belief that Darwin's theory of evolution proposed that, you know what, we had come from a common ancestor and we had adapted with the environment. Okay, so the Bible says that human beings were created on the sixth day of creation, not over a period of millions of years. And here we can also interpret the text when we say humans were created on the sixth day. Was it 6 days in our time, or was it 6 days according to God's time, right? And here the counter argument is that in Genesis 1 and 2, it says that on the sixth day, he had created human beings, whether in totality, yes, right? If you take it literally, in totality, he had created human beings on the sixth day and not over millions of years, which was what Darwin had proposed. Okay. So now, students, we need to know, what does our religion, your own religion, say about, or what is the account about how human beings came into being? So I'm going to look at, and I'm going to what's the word, generalize Abrahamic religions, because again there is a lot of commonalities between the Christians, Jews, and the Muslims. Okay, so the counter, or the religious account of the creation of human beings in Abrahamic religions starts off with that there is no connection between what traditional Christians, Muslims, and Jews believe and the theory of evolution. The traditional, or the traditionalists, only accept that God created Adam and Eve as it is narrated in the book of Genesis. They also argue that there is no evidence in history of human beings evolving the world. However, there is a connection between the theory of evolution and the liberal or progressive Christians. So remember when we studied the three sects within Christianity, we had Orthodox Christians, then we had the Protestants, and then we had your Roman Catholics, right? So your progressive Christians, right? They say that there is a connection between the theory of evolution and also Christianity. However, they argue that everything in the universe was created by God, and the process of evolution is actually part of the divine plan. It is actually part of God's intelligent design. That, yes, I'm not disagreeing with Darwin, but I'm saying that God is actually the creator of the divine plan, or the creator of this process of evolution, the process of evolving of beings over millions of years. They also say that God was responsible for the Big Bang. Right, so these progressive Christians also affirm that, you know what, we don't believe with the essence of the Big Bang, but we believe that God created the Big Bang, right? He had created the Big Bang in order for the universe to come into being. Most Christians would accept that the central message of both Genesis 1 and 2, whether seen as one or two stories, is that God made everything. He also made everything good, and God had made humanity as the high point of creation. So, again, the religious account of how human beings came to being, Christianity, Islam, or African traditional religion will be the main three that we are going to know or we're going to study, because again in South Africa, or the South African students, the demographic is that we belong to those three predominantly. Okay, so now we're going to look at how Christians respond, or how do they respond to the theory of Darwin's theory of evolution. Okay, so again, the conservatives are going to reject Darwin's theory of evolution. So your Orthodox Christians, your Orthodox Muslims, your Orthodox Jews, right? They are going to reject Darwin's theory of evolution, where your liberals, right, your Protestants and your progressive Muslims, etc., they are going to say that, you know what, we're going to merge, right, because of this flexible interpretation of the sacred text. Okay, your fundamentalist Christians believe that as the Bible comes directly from God, everything in it must be the exact truth. Anything that contradicts it, which is the theory of evolution, anything that contradicts it is wrong. So therefore, your fundamental Christians are going to say that your Big Bang theory is also not correct. Okay, so Darwin's theory then is seen as an affront to the biblical account of creation, and therefore some Christians believe that the Bible should be interpreted symbolically, but and not literally. Okay, so progressive Christians are going to accept the idea that there is some form of theistic evolution, right? And that this creation myth that God had created humans on the sixth day must be seen as symbolic. So they admit that there were some stages of creation which involved evolution, explained by the theory of evolution, but they believe in essence that God was responsible for the beginning of the universe, and that he set things in motion and oversaw the process. Okay, they also say that we can learn lessons from the story about the importance of mankind and the responsibility of mankind, and that mankind, the responsibility that mankind has over the rest of creation. Okay, so again, your progressive Christians are going to have no conflict between science and religion. Okay, so to end off, we are going to look at this exemplar question, and I'm going to tie it into what I previously said. This question is a direct question, and it's being asked in a straightforward manner. So the question states that, and this comes from the November 2017-2018 paper, right? Briefly explain the Big Bang theory. And here, students, they now are giving you a second way in which they can ask this question. So it can be asked directly, explain the Big Bang theory, and now you know it's going to relate to how the universe came into being, how the world came into being. Or they can ask you in the second way, briefly explain the scientific account of how the universe came into being. And here I want you to highlight almost immediately universe, scientific account of how the universe came into being. Okay, so they can ask you the direct way or the indirect way by just asking you the scientific account of how the universe came into being. So this question, again, we need to speak about the Big Bang theory, and how the creation of the universe. Okay, so again, here we have to just verbatim explain the Big Bang theory step by step, and again, as much points that you can possibly have for the amount of points. This question ranges from a 14-mark question all the way to a 20-mark question. So 14 marks, 7 points, 20 marks, 10 points. Okay, so cover your bases and make sure that you obviously know enough in order to get the best possible marks for this question. Okay, and then the second type of question that we can have in this particular topic of religion and the sciences is comparing the scientific and the religious accounts of how the universe or how human beings came into being. So here there are two parts to this question, right? So identifying two issues in this question: the scientific explanation of how the universe came into being, Big Bang theory, right? And then again, how your religion, your religious account of how the universe came into being. And hence why I told you how important it is for you to learn your religious account of how the universe and also how human beings come into being. Okay, so most often than not, they like to ask or they don't prescribe the religion. Hence why I'm saying to you, learn your own religions, because it does help you to also know your own religion's account. Okay, so any they won't specify, and hence why you can choose your own religion. And then a comparison requires that you provide opposing views of how the scientific approach differs from the religious explanation of how the universe was created. And again, this word compare, and it's not only found in religion studies, it is found in many other subjects, English, geography, etc. Right? Compare means to give me those opposing views, your religious account of how the universe came into being, and then the Big Bang's account of how the universe came into being. And Conita, I am going to leave it there. Best of luck, learners, in preparation for your exam. And on that particular day, I trust that you're going to study smart, and that this series with Futures Academy has been beneficial to you guys, and that we will try our best and put in our best efforts into passing religion studies this year, inshallah. Shukran, Qanita, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ameen, and shukran to you for joining us this past few weeks, alhamdulillah, and I'll accept your du'as, and also to our students preparing all the best, inshallah. For now, we greet you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.